Stop waiting for permission. Stop hoping someone will save you. The truth is, no one is coming, and that's the best news you'll ever hear, because the moment you choose yourself, you unlock a superpower no one can take away. Today, I'm going to show you how to stop shrinking, start claiming your life, and become unstoppable, starting right now. Choosing yourself begins the moment you stop waiting for approval, validation, or permission from anyone else, and decide that your life is your responsibility alone. It's uncomfortable because it removes the excuse of blaming circumstances or people who didn't show up the way you hoped they would. But that discomfort is the birthplace of power, because when you realize no one is coming to rescue you, you start acting like the hero of your own story. You stop asking, "Why isn't anyone helping me?" and start asking, "What can I do with what I have right now?" That shift is subtle but life-altering because it pulls your attention out of victimhood and into agency. Agency changes how you see options, how you solve problems, and how you move through resistance. When you choose yourself, you stop negotiating with your potential and start negotiating with your excuses. You begin to see that waiting is a luxury you can't afford, and self-pity is a currency you can't spend. This level of ownership is not glamorous or inspirational. It's gritty, honest, and often lonely. But it is the first real step toward the version of you you've always imagined but never fully claimed. Radical self-ownership forces you to examine the places where you've given away your power without even realizing it. You notice the ways you've let people's expectations shape your decisions, even when those expectations never aligned with your values. You see the moments you lowered your standards so someone else wouldn't feel uncomfortable or threatened by your ambition. You recognize how often you waited for the right time, as if confidence or clarity was going to be delivered to your doorstep. Choosing yourself interrupts those patterns by confronting the truth that your life is built on your choices, not your intentions. It reminds you that responsibility isn't blame, it's control, and control gives you options you didn't realize you had. When you own everything, you stop waiting for circumstances to be perfect and start creating momentum from whatever reality you're standing in. That momentum compounds because action, even imperfect action, teaches you more than any amount of planning or dreaming ever will. It gives you data about who you are, what you fear, and what you're capable of when you stop hiding behind hesitation. And each time you choose yourself again, your threshold for what you believe you can do expands. There's a brutal kind of honesty in choosing yourself, the kind most people avoid because it doesn't let you hide. It exposes your patterns, inconsistency, procrastination, and emotional blind spots, and forces you to confront them without sugarcoating. You cannot choose yourself while simultaneously clinging to the story that life is unfair and that you're powerless to change it. The people who transform their lives aren't the ones with the best circumstances. They are the ones who refuse to negotiate with their own potential. They wake up and choose ownership even when they're tired, scared, or uncertain, because they understand that action precedes clarity. Choosing yourself doesn't require feeling ready. It requires being willing to outgrow your excuses, willing to take responsibility for your direction, willing to fail forward without shame, willing to stop expecting others to validate decisions they're not responsible for living through, willing to believe that your future is worth fighting for even when no one else can see it yet. This willingness becomes the foundation for every breakthrough you create. When you choose yourself consistently, you start developing a relationship with your word that becomes unshakable. You stop making commitments you don't intend to keep because you understand the cost of betraying your own potential. You start appreciating the quiet power in doing what you said you'd do, not because someone is watching, but because you are. This internal accountability builds a kind of confidence that external praise can never substitute. It's the confidence that comes from seeing yourself follow through, even on the days where motivation is absent and discipline is all you have left. Over time, those decisions build a track record of self-trust, and self-trust is the fuel of every hyper-forming person. It's what allows you to take bold risks without collapsing under uncertainty because you trust your ability to adapt. It's what keeps you grounded when things fall apart, because you know you won't abandon yourself in the process. This is the confidence that doesn't need to be loud, because its strength is earned privately. And once earned, it becomes nearly impossible for anyone to take from you. Choosing yourself is the ultimate form of empowerment because it redefines who has authority over your life. It shifts the locus of control from external to internal, from circumstance to choice, from permission to personal conviction. It forces you to recognize the difference between influence and control, what you can shape and what you must accept. Once you stop fighting the parts you can't control, you free up energy to dominate the parts you can. You begin to operate from clarity instead of chaos, from intention instead of reaction. You stop asking for shortcuts and start building real capacity, the kind that sustains long-term success. You learn to tolerate discomfort because you understand discomfort is evidence of growth, not failure. You see obstacles not as signals to quit, but as assignments to evolve. You become the kind of person who doesn't get derailed by setbacks because you've chosen yourself too many times to let one moment define you. And that is where the real superpower lies, in the unwavering decision to choose yourself again and again. Investing in yourself is the most reliable, high-return decision you can make because it compounds in ways no external asset ever can. Skills don't depreciate, discipline doesn't expire, mindset doesn't erode when the market shifts or people change. When you choose to build internal assets, you're building something with infinite leverage, something that allows you to create opportunities instead of waiting for them. Most people underestimate how much control they gain once they commit to learning, improving, and strengthening the parts of themselves that no one else sees. They chase external milestones, jobs, approval, titles, without realizing those things rely on external permission. But self-investment doesn't require permission. It only requires intention and consistency. The more you invest, the more you separate yourself from the version of you who hoped things would change and step into the version who makes things change. And when you become someone who consistently develops new skills and capacities, life begins to expand in ways that feel almost unfair to those who don't. Because the truth is, success isn't usually about luck. It's about the compound effect of self-investment over time. The people who rise are the ones who choose to upgrade themselves long before anyone else notices. Choosing yourself means choosing to become more valuable to your goals, your future, your opportunities, before the world demands it. It's deciding that you'd rather spend your energy building abilities that last instead of chasing outcomes that fade. This mindset shift changes everything because instead of asking, "What do I get?" you start asking, "Who do I need to become?" That question opens doors that external validation will never unlock because it turns the responsibility inward. It removes the illusion that someone else is holding the keys when the truth is that your own development is the key. People who invest in themselves operate differently. They think long-term, they delay gratification, and they choose growth over ego. They know that the future doesn't reward the most talented person. It rewards the person who shows up and improves daily. They understand that the safest investment is not money, reputation, or relationships. It is capability. Capability makes you adaptable, resilient, and resourceful in ways that no circumstance can break. And every time you build capability, you increase your personal equity in the marketplace of life. Self-investment also requires facing the uncomfortable truth that you cannot grow without spending time, energy, or resources on the person you want to become. Most people want growth without sacrifice, confidence without mastery, and results without repetition, but it doesn't work that way. If you want to become someone extraordinary, you must commit to practices most people abandon after the first sign of difficulty. Reading the books, taking the courses, hiring the mentors, training the skills, none of that feels glamorous in real time. It feels slow, repetitive, and sometimes frustrating because the payoff isn't immediate and the progress isn't instantly visible. But this is how compounding works, quietly, consistently, and invisibly until it becomes unstoppable. You don't invest in yourself because it guarantees success. You invest in yourself because it guarantees transformation. And transformation is the one thing that makes success sustainable, repeatable, and transferable to any environment. Once you've built internal assets, it doesn't matter what changes around you, you stay capable. And capability is the one advantage no one can compete with, copy, or take away. The highest ROI decisions are usually the ones that stretch you out of your comfort zone and force you to develop new strengths. When you push yourself to grow, you create capacity to handle pressure, make better decisions, solve harder problems, and navigate uncertainty. This is what separates people who thrive in chaos from those who get crushed by it. The more you invest in learning and mastery, the more composure you develop when life becomes unpredictable. Because knowledge builds confidence, repetition builds competence, and competence builds calm. It's the calm that allows you to make strategic decisions instead of emotional ones, even when everything feels unstable. People often underestimate how much money, time, and stress they could save if they invested earlier in becoming someone who can handle bigger challenges. Instead of avoiding discomfort, they would learn to execute through it. Instead of reacting to life, they would be prepared for it, and that preparation becomes an advantage that compounds with every choice they make. When you invest in yourself, you build a type of quiet power that doesn't rely on recognition or permission. You don't need applause to stay disciplined because your motivation comes from vision, not validation. You begin to understand that your greatest leverage is not who you know, but who you are becoming. This makes you independent in a world where most people are dependent on approval, trends, or circumstances to feel secure. Internal strength outperforms external opportunity because opportunity can appear and disappear, but your skill set remains. When you choose yourself through consistent investment, you become the kind of person who creates momentum instead of waiting for it. You stop asking if you're ready and start preparing as if you already are. You build the foundation that supports the life you want instead of hoping life magically rearranges itself for you. And over time, you'll realize that the most powerful decision you ever made was to become someone worth betting on. Because once you are that person, everything else becomes a matter of time, not chance. Confidence isn't something you stumble into. It's something you build through the small, unglamorous decisions no one else sees. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce the belief that you're someone who follows through, someone dependable, someone worth trusting. People think confidence comes from achievements, but achievements are outputs. Confidence is a byproduct of daily integrity. When you say you'll wake up early and you do, you grow. When you say you'll finish the task and you follow through, you grow. Each commitment honored becomes a brick in the foundation of who you believe you are. And the stronger that foundation becomes, the less you rely on external validation to feel grounded. Confidence built from self-trust is quiet, steady, and unfazed by opinions because it's rooted in evidence. It's evidence collected from every moment you chose discipline over comfort, consistency over emotion, effort over excuses. When you trust yourself, the world feels less intimidating because you know you won't betray your own expectations. And that is the kind of confidence no one can give you and no one can take away. Most people struggle with confidence not because they lack potential, but because they repeatedly break promises to themselves. Every time you say you'll do something and skip it, you send a message to your subconscious that your own word means nothing. And once your mind stops believing you, confidence becomes impossible, because confidence requires internal alignment. You can't expect to feel powerful when you've taught yourself to doubt your own intentions. This is why choosing yourself isn't about motivation. Motivation is unreliable, fleeting, and influenced by how you feel. Choosing yourself is about discipline, the act of doing what you said you'd do long after the excitement has faded. Discipline repairs the damage created by inconsistency. It rebuilds trust in a way that makes future follow through easier. And the more you honor your word, the more your identity shifts from someone who hopes to someone who does. Identity is the true source of confidence because you behave in alignment with who you believe you are. When you believe you're someone who finishes, someone who grows, someone who shows up, confidence becomes a natural outcome. Keeping promises to yourself creates momentum, and momentum builds a image strong enough to withstand doubt, fear, and uncertainty. You stop overthinking every decision because you trust your ability to handle whatever comes next. You stop seeking constant reassurance because you've created your own inner stability. You stop comparing yourself to others because you finally understand the game is between who you are and who you can become. This is where confidence becomes powerful, not loud, not aggressive, but deeply rooted in self-respect. Self-respect comes from consistency, from doing the things you know you should do even when your emotions rebel. It comes from realizing that the fastest way to destroy confidence is to constantly negotiate with your lesser impulses. And the fastest way to build confidence is to honor your commitments even when no one is watching. The world celebrates results, but confidence grows from the process, those quiet, private victories that shape your character. When you build character this way, success stops looking accidental and starts looking inevitable. Real confidence doesn't come from hype, affirmations, or pretending to feel strong. It comes from evidence-based self-belief. Evidence accumulates every time you choose action over avoidance, progress over perfection, growth over stagnation. It accumulates when you show up on the days where everything feels heavy, but you still move forward, even if only by 1 inch. Those inches matter because confidence isn't built through massive wins. It's built through accumulated follow-through. Eventually, the noise of doubt becomes irrelevant because your track record speaks louder than your fears. You realize you don't need to feel confident to take action. Action is what creates the feeling in the first place. Every step forward becomes proof, and that proof becomes identity, and that identity becomes unshakable. You learn that confidence is less about believing you'll never fail and more about believing you'll never quit on yourself. This belief creates a calm, grounded sense of inner strength that doesn't need approval or applause to stay steady. And once you've built that kind of confidence, you become unstoppable, not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. Choosing yourself means accepting that growth demands leaving behind pieces of your old identity, even when those pieces feel familiar, safe, or comfortable. You cannot evolve while clinging to patterns that were built for smaller versions of you, versions that didn't yet know what you're capable of becoming. This kind of transformation requires a willingness to disappoint people who benefited from your silence, your smallness, or your predictability. It requires letting go of relationships that no longer align with your direction, even if the history feels heavy and the guilt feels real. Growth doesn't ask for permission. It asks for courage, and courage rarely feels convenient or socially acceptable. Choosing yourself means saying yes to the future you want more than the past you've outgrown, even when you don't have all the answers yet. It means trusting your internal compass when others don't understand the direction you're heading in. It means embracing discomfort as confirmation that you're moving towards something bigger, not stepping away from something broken. People will question your decisions, but that questioning is a reflection of their limitations, not yours. The truth is, growth requires letting go, and letting go is an act of self-respect in disguise. There's a quiet grief that comes with choosing yourself, a grief that people rarely talk about because it doesn't fit the inspirational narrative. You grieve old habits that once brought comfort, even if they held you back more than they helped you forward. You grieve versions of yourself who didn't know better, who accepted less, who survived instead of thrived. You grieve the people you lose along the way, not because they were bad, but because they couldn't walk where you were going. This grief is not a sign that you made the wrong choice. It's a sign that you're shedding what no longer belongs to your evolution. The more you grow, the more you learn to honor endings as necessary chapters, not failures. You recognize that holding onto the past out of obligation is the fastest way to betray your potential. So you let go, not harshly, but intentionally, understanding that your path requires space for new relationships, opportunities, and identities. You begin to see your journey not as a loss of people, but as a return to yourself. And in that return, you discover strength you didn't know you had. Choosing yourself also means becoming someone who can withstand being misunderstood without shrinking. People who stay the same will often question those who choose to evolve because your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. They may label you selfish, distant, or changed, but change is the point and growth is the goal. You learn that the opinions of others cannot steer a life they don't have to live, and their discomfort cannot dictate your direction. This level of detachment is not coldness, it's clarity, the kind that protects your peace and preserves your focus. You stop seeking approval because you realize approval is conditional, fragile, and easily withdrawn. What you build inside yourself, discipline, identity, vision, cannot be taken away, and that becomes your strongest anchor. The more you choose yourself, the less you need external validation, and the more powerful your decisions become. You start making choices that align with future alignment rather than current acceptance. And in doing so, you create a life that feels like yours, not one borrowed from expectations you never agreed to serve. Over time, choosing yourself becomes less about loss and more about expansion, less about leaving and more about arriving. You expand into capacities you didn't know you had because you finally stopped limiting yourself to past versions that expired long ago. You arrive in spaces that feel aligned because you finally stopped forcing yourself into molds that never fit. You build relationships that support your growth because you finally set the boundaries you once avoided. And you create a life that reflects your potential instead of your fears, your standards instead of your insecurities. Choosing yourself becomes your superpower because it forces every area of your life to rise to the level of your self-respect. It turns growth into a lifestyle, discomfort into a signal, discipline into identity, and self-belief into strategy. You become someone who isn't afraid to outgrow, to evolve, to expand beyond what anyone expected, including your past self. You realize that the hardest person to choose was always you, and the most rewarding choice you'll ever make is choosing yourself again. And in that choice, you reclaim your power, your direction, and your future, one courageous decision at a time.